Chapter 71 The Truth. Crusher gripped Roz in his giant claw and looked at her weak little body. He could easily squeeze the life out of her and rid himself of the past. Motors hummed as he tightened his grip, but he stopped when our robot started speaking. The attempt to confuse Crusher with lies had not gone well, so Roz spoke the truth instead. I lied to you earlier, admitted Roz. The truth is that I was not sent here by the Juggernaut. I came on my own to stop you. I meant you no harm. I was only trying to protect what I love. What you do not know is that the runoff from this mine is damaged, a vast area of ocean wilderness, including the island where I live. It does not matter what you do to me, but I am begging you, Crusher, please stop mining. You have the power to save many lives. Crusher was designed for a single purpose, to mine deep-sea minerals. His computer brain was not equipped to handle such a strange situation. The mountaintop was quiet as he studied Roz and tried to decide what to do with her. The quiet was interrupted by sounds from above. Whistles and moans, and a clickety-clickety-clack. Crusher pointed his headlights up toward the sounds, and his light beams faded into darkness. Everything was still, until high overhead, a whale passed through the beams of light. Then another whale passed through. 3 giant squid passed through, followed by 2 sharks. More large ocean animals passed through the light, and then something else emerged. It was big, really big, and it seemed to grow bigger as it descended into the light. The mysterious massive object was shaped like a barrel, topped with a platform and a jumble of structures. As you might have guessed, that mysterious massive object was the Juggernaut. The mining station had been sinking for hours. It sank slowly at first, held up by the air trapped in its compartments. Gradually, those compartments flooded with water, and the station gained speed on its way to the bottom of the ocean. This had given the ancient shark an idea. She wanted to crush the mining robot beneath the sinking station and finally put an end to the poison tide. Of course, for her plan to succeed, the shark needed help. She needed Roz to keep Crusher distracted. As she needed an army of mighty animals to guide the sinking station so it would crash down onto the mining robot. Guri was asking a lot of the animals. The work was exhausting. The poison tide could start flowing. The giant squid and the sharks had no problem diving deep. However, some of the whales were running out of breath. But whenever a whale headed back to the surface, another one took its place. The ancient shark raced around, shouting out commands. We need more animals over here. Quickly. All right, everybody, get ready to push against the station in 3, 2, 1, push! The animals whipped their tails and flapped their fins, pushing hard against the station while it sank. They groaned from the tremendous effort, but together they slowly muscled the massive thing into position and aimed it directly in the mining robot. When the station was on course, the ancient shark called out, "Let it go!" All at once, the army of animals withdrew, and the Juggernaut continued sinking straight toward its target. Nothing could stop the station now. The mining robot was doomed. The poison tide was doomed. But there would be no celebration, because just then a fish swam up to the ancient shark with terrible news. He announced that Roz had been captured by Crusher. In that moment, everyone realized the wild robot was also doomed. They couldn't watch what happened next, so the sharks and the whales and the squid and the fish all turned and swam away. If you're slightly confused by these events, reader, you're not alone. Crusher was confused as well. None of this made any sense to him. Roz, on the other hand, had no trouble understanding. She understood what the ancient shark was doing, and she understood that neither robot would survive. Roz gazed into Crusher's eyes and said, "I am very sorry it has come to this. You were simply doing your job, as was I." The Juggernaut hurtled downward, closer and closer. It seemed to fill the entire ocean. Crusher released rods and raised his claws to brace for the impact, and then the station came crashing down upon them. Chapter 72. The Return. On their long flight home, Brightbill and Glimmer soared above rolling waves, and above tall sea cliffs, and above the wide, flat tundra. They passed high above a beach and continued above the poison tide as it spread south through the ocean. After 3 days of flying, that familiar rocky shape appeared in the distance. The island looked awful. It was gray and spiked with dead trees and surrounded by cloudy water. But as the geese flew closer, the island's greener interior came into view. They glided over the hills and down into the forest, and there, following Loudwing through the undergrowth, were their precious little goslings. Not so little, actually. The goslings were growing fast. They had already lost their fluff and were covered with silky feathers. Loudwing sang to the goslings as they waddled along. Left, right, we walk like this when we're not in flight. And the goslings repeated, left, right, we walk like this when we're not in flight. The old goose stopped suddenly, and the goslings piled up behind her. Look who it is, she whispered. The goslings smiled and squawked and flapped over to their parents, bonking into one another and tumbling across the ground. Brightbill and Glimmer wrapped their wings around the 5 little geese, and they all had each other close for a very long time. Chapter 73. The Discovery. In the weeks following their return, Brightbill and Glimmer told everyone about their journey to the far north. They spoke of icebergs and of robots and of the armies of ocean animals who sunk the mighty Juggernaut. Their friends wanted to hear all the exciting details, but what they wanted more than anything was for the poison tide to leave and for Roz to come home. We just want to go back to our normal lives, said Shelley. Sea otters belong in the sea. They certainly do, agreed Mr. Beaver. I'm worried about my kids, and I'm worried about Roz, and I'm worried about our island, and I'm worried about the ocean, and I guess what I'm saying is I'm worried about everything, said Chit-Chat. Geese had it easier than most. To survive, they needed only plants and fresh water and each other. And while most of the animals were stranded on the island, the geese were free to fly away whenever they liked. As a matter of fact, it was almost time for their next winter migration. The goslings had made plenty of short flights, but a migration would require real strength and smarts. So every morning, Brightbill led his family on flight across the island to exercise their muscles and their minds. And it was during one of those flights that our friends made truly momentous discovery. The poison tide was leaving. With each passing day, the ocean became clearer and clearer. And then one morning, the geese took flight to find that the flow of poison tide had completely stopped. However, as they glided above the shoreline, they saw that their problems weren't quite over. There was still a dusting of poison tide on the seabed and all along the coast. The poison tide might have stopped flowing, but traces of the toxic dust still remained. Chapter 74. The Fleet. Island animals were hiding and looking out to sea at a fleet of ships. Dozens of ships in various shapes and sizes were sailing together in a line that stretched for miles. But as the fleet drew nearer, the animals slowly realized that they weren't ships at all. They were robots. The mining station manager had promised to clean up the poison tide, and she was keeping her word. Specialized robots had been sent to follow the poison tide's path and to remove the toxic dust as they went. Different robots worked in different ways. Some had white spinning drums that skimmed dust from the surface of the ocean. Others roamed the depths using magnets to collect the metallic particles. Drones hovered in the sky and scanned for patches of gently shimmering water. Farther out, enormous robotic barges plowed through the waves. There was movement in the shallows, and up climbed a swarm of small robots. Hundreds of them scuttled along the coast, removing any toxic dust they found. They crawled over rocks and down into tide pools and through the dead fields that ringed the island. The coastline was long, but there were so many small robots that they cleaned it only a day. When the job was finished, they scuttled back into the ocean, and the entire fleet of robots continued south. Chapter 75. The Coast. As the fleet of robots sailed away, the animals came out from their hiding places. Slowly, cautiously, the curious creatures crept toward the coast to see if the poison tide was really gone. Super the owl flew down from the hills. With his sharp vision, he searched for any last traces of the poison tide. Specks of shimmering dust could still be found in some cracks and crevices, but the rest had been removed. Animals smiled as the owl glided over, hooting, "Don't be afraid, a little caution is all you need." Brightbill's family fluttered onto the shore and started exploring. The goslings had never been so close to the ocean. They were fascinated by the motion of the waves, and they giggled at the sound of the sloshing water. Bloop, spish, plunk. Tears rolled down Glimmer's cheeks, and she cried out, "Oh, Brightbill, can you believe the poison tide has finally ended?" Brightbill shed a few tears as well. Sniffling, he said, "I knew my mother would find a way." But as the family of geese peered into the shallows, they were reminded of the painful truth. All the sea life was missing. What had once been a healthy reef, bustling with activity, was now nothing more than water and rocks and sand. The gosling had questions. Will fish ever live here again? What if the seaweed doesn't grow back? Is the water safe to touch? That last question troubled Brightbill and Glimmer. The ocean seemed to be safe, but they didn't want their gosling testing the water. Everybody was glancing around, wondering who would be the first to go in. When they heard a stampede of footsteps, sea otters were charging over the rocks. A little caution would have been wise, but they couldn't wait another second. Otter after otter dove into the shallows, and when they popped up, they were grinning. "The water is fine," squeaked Shelly. The otters linked arms to form a raft of furry bodies that undulate with the gently rolling waves. It was such a relief to be back where they belonged. Across the island, the animals were feeling a mixture of emotions: joy that the poison tide was gone, sadness about all that had been lost, worry for Roz, who had given so much and who was still somewhere in the ocean. Roz hadn't been seen in nearly a month. It was impossible to know when she would return, or if she would return at all. A hush fell over the island as the animals gave quiet thanks to the wild robot. Even the young goslings were quiet at first. Soon, though, the goslings began squawking and hopping up and down and pointing excitedly at the ocean. Something was out there, moving through the water, and it was coming to shore.